Okay, so we'll get started. So this is the agenda for today's session. I've split the topics into two parts, part 1 and 2. If you see here, the Varnashrama Dharma, the general understanding. We'll start off with the general understanding of Varnashrama Dharma. And then we look at spirituality, we look at a few other things, enlightenment, chakras or energies within us. We want to see how colors work when we look at nature or the gunas of our energies. And there are many other things that we would talk on part 1, and then we would switch over to part 2, which is the actual topic for today's session. But we have to look at part 1 if we want to understand part 2. So in part 2, we will look at what Varna is, Ashrama and Dharma, and then we'll try to connect the dots. We will also look at where the Varna is mentioned in the Rig Veda and the Bhagavad Gita and so on, and we'll try to interpret after today's session. So let's get into part 1, Varnashrama Dharma. The general understanding of Varnashrama Dharma is the duties that must be performed by you as an individual at different stages of your life, called ashrams, based on where you are born, called Varnas. So this is the general understanding, right, for all of us. Varnas, or in other words, colors, what they mean is it's a social divisions or social groups based on one's birth. And ashrams means stages in life. So there are multiple social groups, and each group has a name associated to it, has a color associated to it. And let's say a person is born in a family that belongs to a specific social group, then that person is expected to do certain things at different stages in his or her life, which is the ashram. So this is at a high level. Let's say you are a Kshatriya, born in a Kshatriya Varna, then the child is expected to learn martial arts skills and then become a king or a warrior. That's the understanding that's been coming for ages, right? So that's what is the general understanding of Varnashrama Dharma. The 4 Varnas as defined are what you see here: Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. And these are hierarchical as we see here. The Brahmins are, for example, they become the priests or the teachers. Kshatriyas are warriors like police and army today. Vaishyas are more farmers and merchants and businessmen. Shudras are laborers and workers. So this is hierarchical in nature. So if you look at Brahmacharya, it's more a childhood. Grihastha is when you get married, you settle in a family life, household. Close to retirement or retirement is Vanaprastha, and renunciation is sannyasa at a very old age. So if you look at this Varnashrama Dharma, it's a broader classification of the Hindu caste system. There are about 3,000 castes today, 25,000 subcastes, and it's again a graded hierarchy. So if you take one particular Varna, let's say Brahmin, for example, below that there are multiple castes, and below each caste there are multiple subcastes. So this is how the umbrella is. It's again a graded hierarchy. And apart from the 4 Varnas in the society, even till today, we also have the untouchables who do not fall under any of these 4 Varnas. They're called the Dalits or Panchamas, and they are the outcasts. And the job they are expected to do is like manual scavenging, sanitization works, and so on. So this is at a very high level, the general understanding of Varnashrama Dharma. So now let's look into what spirituality is all about. And there's a reason why we are looking at it. For many of us, spirituality and religion are the same, right? We think both are the same. But in reality, spirituality and religion are not the same. They are not synonyms. If you look at spirituality, the very neat definition of spirituality will be, it's doing all that is needed to improve the quality of oneself. That's all spirituality is all about. Because if you think about it, for all of us, in nature, the drive or the urge within us is to grow from one level to the next. Wherever we are, we want to move to the next level, right? That's always been the urge for all of us as humans. And that's what is spirituality. And this urge is very natural. Whereas when you look at religion, we know it is man-made, right? It's only after Jesus Christ, Christianity came into existence. So the same with all religions. So religion is man-made, spirituality is very natural. It's the urge to grow from one level to the next. So spirituality is actually a journey. It's a growth from one level to the other. And religions may be the different pathways that we can choose, and we have the choice to do that. Of course, there are non-religious pathways too. So where does this journey ultimately lead us to, and how far does this growth of oneself go to? So wherever we travel to, right, at the end of the day, we all want to go back home, right? Anywhere we travel to, any part of the world, the end of the day, we all want to go back home. And the reason is, we want to be who we are, and home is the only place where we can be who we are, right? We want to be natural. So that is where this journey will lead us to, the growth from one level to the other. Ultimately, it leads us to our home. So all roads lead to home. So let's see what this home is all about. When you look at the Indian subcontinent, it has always been a spiritual land for thousands of years. We know that, right? So what does that mean? Now we know what spirituality is. The primary focus of each and every person who lived here was on his or own spiritual growth. So that's how this Indian subcontinent has always been, focus on one's own growth. That is the primary focus. All practices, festivals, rituals, food, and lifestyle, they were all accurately and skillfully planned, keeping this spiritual growth in mind. And this truly was a way of living. That's how our ancestors, they devised a way where it became the way of living. Anything we did was towards this upliftment, towards this progress, towards this journey. So to enhance the spiritual growth, to improve the quality of oneself, and as a result, accomplish the goal. So what is the goal? The goal is to reach our home. Because you remember where the previous slide we saw, right? Wherever you go, you want to come back home. So that's the goal, to go back to our home. And everything that was done was to achieve this goal. So talking about goals, before we go into how this happens in humans, we want to look at the animals, right? So animals, the growth is horizontal. Physical, we know the growth is horizontal, but even psychologically, the growth is limited. They cannot make their own decisions. Animals have a predefined line, bottom and up. So this is the line that's given to them, and they have to grow in between. That's how nature is. So which means psychologically as well, they cannot make their own decisions. And in Tamil, its animals are called as Vilangu, which means handcuff, literally handcuff. And it's a true name given to animals because they have predefined top and bottom lines. They cannot grow beyond that. That's why we call them as Vilangu or handcuff. And even the livestock farm animals like cattle, they're called Kal Nadai. Kal means leg and Nadai means walk, which means they go where their legs take them to. They do not think or plan on what's next. Wherever their legs take them to, they just keep walking, keep going. So that's how animals are. They cannot make their own decisions. But let's take a look at humans. We as humans, we only have the bottom line defined. What does that mean? Physically, I know we have a vertical growth, right? Not like animals. But if you look at psychological and spiritual growth as well, this is in our hands and it's a vertical growth. We can grow as far as we can. So keep growing, and then there's the end, the destination or the last stop in this vertical growth or journey, which is what we call as our home. So due to our karmic baggage in a given lifetime, we are unable to achieve this goal, right? The reason I'm saying this is because we are here today. If we would have achieved our home, then we are not going to be sitting here, right? So due to our karmic baggage, we keep coming back. This causes rebirth, the same soul with different physical bodies each time. And the cycle goes on and on and on till the goal of the soul is achieved, which is what? Reaching the home. And what do we call it? We call it mukti or moksha or enlightenment. There are different names given to it, but what it actually means is reaching your home. That's what it means. So anything and everything that is needed to achieve this goal is done. And as I said, that's the way of living that was put together by our ancestors, very smart way. Because anything that we did, food or lifestyle or the celebrations or festivals, you name it, ultimately it's going to take us to achieving the goal. That's where it takes us to. So we saw what spirituality is. We saw spirituality is improving the quality of oneself. It's a vertical journey, and that journey is done to achieve the goal, which is what we call as enlightenment, mukti or moksha. Now, how does this technically happen in us? We have to understand that as well, right? So I know that the spiritual growth is the vertical growth. It takes us to our home enlightenment. But what happens within us? What is technically happening within us for this process to happen? When you look at our physical bodies, we have gross. We can touch our physical bodies. We can feel, even though our hearts, lungs, and brain it's inside. We know where it is. We can touch and feel them. We can touch our nose, mouth, eyes. Our physical body is very, very gross. Whereas we have psychological bodies that are very subtle, and we can feel those, but we cannot see. Our mind, the emotions that come up, the thoughts in our minds, these are all psychological. We can feel them, but we cannot see. And we also have energy bodies. Like in our physical bodies, we have the veins and arteries that carry blood. In our energy bodies, there are the nadis that are the energy carriers that carry energies in our energy bodies. And the intersection of three nadis is what we call as chakras, or the energy centers. If you look at the fan here with three blades, I just put this picture here so you can imagine how these three nadis come together, and the intersecting point is what we call as chakras, or the energy centers. There are thousands of nadis in us, and where three nadis intersect, there is gushing of energy. So we saw, right, in the previous slide, the three nadis intersect. That's what is called a chakra. So these nadis are energy carriers, and when the three nadis intersect with each other, there's gushing of energy, there's whirlpool of energies, as you see in the picture here, right? And these intersections are called chakras. You remember the fan we saw that was turned off in the previous slide? Now the fan is turned on. So you don't see the blades anymore. You only see a circular motion. That's what is a chakra. When there's gushing of energies, it's circular in motion, and that's why we call them as chakras. You know what chakras are, right? Like a wheel. It's circular in shape. And that's why it got its name, chakras. Now, when we look at our body, there are 114 chakras in and outside of us. So what do I mean by that? There are 112 chakras within us and 2 above us. Out of these 112, 108 can be controlled by us. And out of these 108, there are 7 major chakras that are distributed vertically. Remember the vertical growth? So there are 7 major chakras that are distributed vertically from the base of the spine to above our head. So if you look at these chakras, the first one on top, these are the 7 chakras. Forget about the colors. The top one is the Sahasrara, or the crown chakra, that's above the head. The next one is between our eyebrows, the third eye chakra, or the Agna. Then the third one is in here at the throat. This is called the Vishuddhi chakra, the throat chakra. The fourth one is the Anahata, or the heart chakra. Heart as in the center of the chest, not the physical heart. Heart as in the center of the chest, that's the Anahata. And then we have the Manipura around the navel area, and Swadhisthana, or the sex chakra. And this is few inches above the base of the spine. And then the last chakra at the base of the spine is called the Muladhara, or the root chakra. And so these are the 7 chakras distributed vertically across the spine, from the base of the spine to the top of the head. And as we said, these vertical chakras, they are distributed vertically. They play a major role in enlightenment. And that's what we are going to see here. So at birth, for any person at birth, the life force energy, which is a feminine energy, it's also called a Shakti, or you would have heard of Kundalini, right? It's another name given to it, or Prakriti. This life force energy is concentrated at the Muladhara. Without this life force energy, you cannot do anything in this on this earth. So this life force energy is concentrated at the Mooladhara at birth. And then this energy moves up from one chakra to the next until it reaches the Sahasrara or the crown chakra. But one thing to note here is from Mooladhara to the next chakra, which is the Swadhisthana, it rises up with no effort. It just rises up with no effort. But from Swadhisthana all the way till the Agna, based on our actions at different phases of life, this life force energy rises up. It keeps rising up, but I have to put in some effort for it to rise up. We'll go to that. What kind of effort? We'll get to that. And the higher consciousness, which is the masculine energy. We saw about the feminine energy, right? Now the higher consciousness, which is the masculine energy. We also call this a Shiva or Purusha, or there are many other names to it. So this higher consciousness is at the crown, on top, the Sahasrara, and it is waiting. So what it is? It's waiting for the feminine energy to come unite with it. So this feminine energy that keeps rising up the different levels of the chakras, it unites with the masculine energies on top, and this is what is technically called mukti or moksha or enlightenment. Remember the goal of the soul, reaching the home and all that, right? So what technically happens within us is the life force energy rises from the base of the spine all the way to the Sahasrara or the crown chakra, the female and the male energies. So when I say feminine and masculine energies, they are not male and female like us. The characteristics of these energies are more feminine and masculine. So these two energies coming together is what is called enlightenment. So the goal of the soul is to reach the home, and we've reached the home. So this is what technically happens within us. Now, let's take a closer look at these chakras. So the base of the spine, it's the Mooladhara, right? So the Mooladhara is it actually roots us to the earth. It gives us the sthira nature. When I say sthira, the stability is what this chakra is all about. So if you want to live on this earth, if you want to abide by its norms, then the Mooladhara chakra or the root chakra has to root us strongly to this earth. And what is the characteristic of it? It is highly materialistic, which means when the energy is all focused there, we are highly materialistic, which means it's purely for survival, and we are more materialistic in nature, and we want everything for us. When the energy here is high, we are very alert. And the energy here is low and imbalanced, dullness and inertia. That's how we feel. And when is the energy concentrated at the Mooladhara? From birth to adolescent. You remember I said from Mooladhara to Swadhisthana, it rises all by itself. So from birth to adolescent is when ideally the Mooladhara is, the energy is focused at the Mooladhara. I would really appreciate if I think somebody is not on mute. Please go on mute. And the color associated with this chakra is black. And we'll get to that. The next is Swadhisthana, which is like few inches above the base of the spine. It's a sex chakra, so it's all reproduction. If energy is higher, it's creative. It makes us more creative. And when the energy is low and imbalanced, then lust is all what we feel. This is in between the adolescent to family age. And the color associated is yellow. Manipura is, it's more, I call this the doership chakra, because you are a child, then you grow up. At Swadhisthana, you are like at adolescent age, you have all these hormones secreting physically, you get attracted towards the opposite sex, you get married, you fall in love, you get married, and then you have a family life. And then that's where in Manipura, your energy has to go up, where all you do is work for the family. You have a family set up, you have children, you have a lot of desires, you run behind the desires, you work for the family. So there's so much of action involved there. So that's why I call this as a doership chakra. And when the energy is high here, the energy, all we see is experiences joy and generosity. And when the energy is low, we feel greed and jealousy. So Anahata is all compassion. When the energy is high, all you feel is love. And when the energy is low, all you feel is fear and hate. It's indicated by the color green. And then Vishuddhi. Vishuddhi means expansion, speech, power, communication. When the energy is high, all you feel is gratitude, and you are in grief when the energy is low and imbalanced. Agna chakra is a very important chakra, all the way between the two eyebrows. Your ego, the karma, everything else dissolves here. So there's no more ego, no more karma. And then your intellect, which is purely for survival, now flips to intelligence. So when the energy is high here, it's all awareness. And when the energy is low, anger. It's indicated by the color white. So if you look at, there's so much to talk about chakras, but we'll cover only as much as it's needed for the session today, right? So if you look at the bottom three chakras, Mooladhara, Swadhisthana, and Manipura, forget about the crown chakra or the Sahasrara, the 6 chakras that is within us, the bottom 3 chakras, the Mooladhara, Swadhisthana, and Manipura, I group them as and call them as the material world. And there's a reason behind it, because our senses work outward, it's purely for survival. The top 3 chakras, Anahata, Vishuddhi, and Agna, it's called the spiritual world because the senses work inward. You're more spiritual and less material. Now, when a person is in the material world, let's say the person's life force energy is somewhere in Mooladhara, Swadhisthana, or Manipura, any one of the chakras in the material world, and when the person dies, passes away, the journey, when he is reborn, at rebirth, his journey starts from Mooladhara. This is a very important point to note, because, and this is what is happening for most of us, because when a person dies in the spiritual world, let's say when the life force energy is in Anahata or Vishuddhi or Agna, then the person has a very short journey. Because when he is reborn in the next birth, his journey starts from Anahata, that is from the spiritual world. It doesn't start from the Mooladhara. Even though we say when a person is born, the life force energy starts from Mooladhara. This is in general for most of us. But in case, let's say in this birth, you stepped into the spiritual world, you touched the Anahata. So then for some reason you grow old and then you die, and then when you come back, your journey is very short. And the example, the typical example I always give is Vivekananda, because we all know him. His journey was very short. In his birth as Vivekananda, we never saw him with lust or getting attracted towards the opposite sex. He never had the intention to get into a family life. All he wanted, he was more spiritual right from his childhood. And then his journey was very short. He died in his 30s. He attained mukti. And if you see, because his journey started from the spiritual world, from the Anahata, it was very short. He only had 3 chakras to go up to. And so that's how it is. And for most of us, I very strongly say that we never got into the spiritual world, because if you see, we've lived thousands of births, we've taken thousands of births, we lived millions of years, but we are again here today, right? That's because we never got into the spiritual world. We never got into Anahata. If we would have gotten into Anahata, then it's either in this birth or the next birth, we would definitely attain mukti. Because we did not touch the Anahata, we've always been in the material world. We have desires, we run behind desires, karma baggage grows up, and then we come back, and then we come back, and the cycle goes on and on and on. So there has to be a point where you break the cycle and get into the Anahata, so that either in this birth or the next birth, we achieve the goal, attain enlightenment. So this is also something to keep in mind about the chakras. Now, Varna is all colors, right? So before we get into Varna, I want you to understand how colors work. And this is very scientific. When you look at a red t-shirt, the t-shirt appears red because when light falls on it, it holds on to all colors, but it gives away red, which means it reflects the color red, but it holds on to all color. If you see light passing through a prism, you will know there are 7 colors. So when light falls on an object, if the object holds on to all the colors but reflects a particular color, that's how the color of the object is. So when you look at an object which is black, it holds on to all colors and it does not give away anything. If you look at a red t-shirt, it gives away red. It reflects red. And that's why it appears as red. A black object does not give away anything. It holds on to all colors, so it appears black. Contrary, white it appears white because it does not hold on to anything, and it gives away everything, all the colors. So this is how colors work. So we have to keep this concept in mind. And then let's go back to the chakras. Remember, we said the Mooladhara, Swadhisthana, Manipura, these are associated to specific colors. We saw that in the previous slide, right? So now if you look at how colors work, you know how colors work. When you look at Mooladhara, we are highly materialistic here. When the energy is focused at the Mooladhara, we are highly materialistic. We hold on to everything. We want everything for us. We don't want to give away anything. That's what a black color is, right? It holds on to everything. It does not give away anything. And so Mooladhara is associated with the color black because its nature is the way black works. When you look at Swadhisthana, it's associated with color yellow because Swadhisthana is a center of reproduction, creativity, there's sprouting life, there's illuminating, there's a lot of energy in there. So it's more like a sunshine. So it's assigned the color yellow. When you look at Manipura, you remember the doership I said? So we are running all the time. We are working all the time. There's so much of action. So that's valor, fire, vibrant and energizing. So Manipura is associated with red. Anahata is stepping into the spiritual world. It's renewal, spring, compassionate, unconditional love. So it's associated with the color green. Vishuddhi is blue because Vishuddhi is expansion. When you look at the space, when you look at the sky, it's all blue. It's all space expanding. The throat has to be empty space so that when you speak, it comes out, right? And it's associated with speech, communication, trustworthy, and Vishuddhi is color blue. Agna, again, what did we see for white? It gives away everything. It does not hold on to anything. When you are at the Agna, all your desires disappear. Okay, so you're not in, so that's why you are at Agna. When you move from the lower to the top chakra, you slowly give away everything, all the desires. You're not materialistic at all. So when you give away everything and all you hold on to is the intelligence or the wisdom, which is pure and truth, and Agna is represented by the color white. So this is how the chakras are associated with the different colors that we see here. And there's one more slide we need to see too before we go on to part 2. And this is also associated to chakras. So we saw about the different characteristics of our own energies at our own chakras. We saw how the colors that are associated to these chakras and why. Now there's one more thing we need to know about these chakras and the energies. It's their nature or gunas. We call them as gunas. Guna means the nature of that particular energy. It's a quality of energies in us. There are 3 specific gunas: tamas, rajas, and sattvic. You would have heard of this. Tamas is, all of these are needed for us. Tamas is resting the body and mind. We do that every night, right? We go to sleep, we rest, and then we wake up. When we wake up, we are so fresh. So everything needs rest, right? So we need rest too, and resting is essential. And rajas is movement, including thinking. We cannot be static. We have to move. Even our very thoughts, that is rajas. So there's movement needed for us, and that's rajas. And sattva is clarity and wisdom. So at different points in time, our energies have to flip from tamas to rajas to sattva. So when we are resting and sleeping, we are not in rajas mode. When we are in rajas mode, we are not sleeping, so there's no tamas. So these, you see how these 3 are essential for our day-to-day life. But when there is imbalance in tamas and rajas, then that's where the problem is. And the quality of the nature is impacted by our food and lifestyle primarily. When there's imbalance in tamas, there's lethargy and dullness. And this is more at the Mooladhara and Swadhisthana. When there's lethargy and dullness, the energy is more low and imbalanced at the Mooladhara and Swadhisthana. When there's imbalance in rajas, when you say rajas, it's motion and activity and movement. So which is the chakra of action? Manipura, right? The doership chakra. So whenever there's imbalance in rajas, there's an imbalance in Manipura. That's what it means. There's restlessness, hyperactivity, and there's extremity of emotions. You know, there's so much fear, so much anger, jealousy, greed. So when there's extremity of emotions, there's imbalance in the Manipura. And sattva, there's no imbalance at all. It's the highest state. You're always happy, balanced, clear, and centered. So this is the Agna chakra. So we saw a lot of things, right? In part 1, we saw spirituality, we saw about the goal, we saw about reaching home, we saw about how technically it happens within us, chakras, energies, the characteristics of these chakras or energies, we saw how colors work, and we saw nature, the gunas, the tamas, rajas, and sattvic. So we are able to relate to all of these. And I think now is the time to go into part 2, which is the actual topic for today, Varnashrama Dharma. So let's move on to part 2. I think all this time we were only in the runway, so it's a takeoff time now. So fasten your seatbelts and we'll see how to connect the dots. So I think in the very first slide we saw about Varna, right? We know what Varna, it's a social classification. That's a general understanding. Varna means color. We saw the 4 Varnas, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, and the colors associated to them. So Varna is a broader classification of the caste system. It's a graded hierarchy. This was when we started off with the session. But after we saw completed part 1, now with all the knowledge that we have gained, let's interpret Varna again one more time and see what it actually means. So our primary focus is on the goal. That's what we've been seeing all throughout in the session. At birth, our life force energy is in Mooladhara Chakra. We saw that. That means we are highly materialistic and we are associated with the color black. And we are all Shudras at birth. Irrespective of whichever family we are born in, we would all be called as Shudras because our life force energy in the Mooladhara Chakra when we are born makes us more materialistic, which means we hold on to everything. We don't want to give anything to anyone. So we are represented by the color black, which is Shudras. So it's not a social classification that we see here. It is more within one's own self, where you are, where your energy is at that particular point in time. Okay, so at any given point in time, wherever your energy is focused in, so you can analyze for yourself and see what Varna you are in. So at birth, for all of us, we are all Shudras because we are all materialistic and we are indicated by the color black. Let's move to the next level. When the energy goes up to Swadhisthana Chakra, it's creativity and reproduction, right? So we are Vaishyas. So that's where, we call the business people and the merchants because they multiply the money, farmers who are involved in production. So that's not what it actually means. The Swadhisthana means creativity and reproduction. So we are Vaishyas. So when are we Vaishyas? Our energy rises up from the Mooladhara to the next Swadhisthana Chakra at adolescence. So at adolescence, we are all Vaishyas. When we are born, we are all Shudras. When we are in adolescent age, we are all Vaishyas. Now, when the energy goes up to Manipura Chakra, it's indicated by the color red and we are all Kshatriyas. Because what do we do at Manipura? We do all we do is action, right? It's a doership chakra. So we are all Kshatriyas. We are all warriors. We are all fighting in our lives for something or the other. We are running behind. We have desires. We are fighting for something and we are all Kshatriyas or warriors. And when the energy goes up to the Agna Chakra, so it goes into the spiritual world, you cross the Anahata and the Vishuddhi, and when it goes into Agna, which is the highest level within us, before it goes to the crown chakra, all we see here and experience is wisdom and intelligence. And what is the indication of color white? It gives away everything. It does not hold on to anything, right? So when our energy reaches the Agna Chakra, we are all white, which is we are all Brahmins. So when we are born, we are Shudras. At adolescent, we are Vaishyas. When we are in our family, in the doership chakra, Manipura, we are Kshatriyas. And then when we reach the Agna, we are Brahmins. So we are any of these 4 Varnas based on where our life force energy is at that point in time. So after part 1, this is how we should be interpreting Varnas or colors. Now let's see how we can interpret ashram. Okay. So again, go back to the very first slide. We saw ashram as brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyasa, right? Bachelor, householder, retired, and renuncer. Now Now, ashrams, our general understanding, ashrams are the different stages or stations in life. There are 4 ashrams. Every varna or caste is expected to do certain tasks in every station or ashram. That's the general understanding we saw in slide 1. For example, let's take a typical family where there is a child 5-year-old, parents 30-year-old, grandparents between 55 and 60-year-old, and then there are great grandparents 80 plus. So when you see in a typical family like this, the child is a bachelor or brahmacharya, the parent is the grihastha or the householder, vanaprastha is the grandparents where they've retired or about to retire, and then the great grandparents who are renouncing already, who are in the sannyasa station. So this is the general understanding. Now, after we saw part 1, let's see how we can interpret ashram. So what does this mean to us now? A brahmacharya we know is a bachelor from birth to adolescent. That's from Mooladhara to Swadhisthana. And we saw in Varnas, we are all Shudras. So from birth to adolescent, which is the first stage of life, we are all Shudras. And that's what it means. Grihastha is when you're married, household life from Swadhisthana to Manipura before it reaches the spiritual world. The Anahata, we are all Grihastha. And what are we? We move from Vaishya to Kshatriyas. That's the transition. And Vanaprastha is the retirement or close to retirement. Remember the grandparent in the previous slide? That's a transition from material world to spiritual world. We enter into the Anahata Chakra. And I'm not so here I'm not associating to any class, because remember I said most of the time we are Kshatriyas. And then we die, we come back, our life starts again from the base of the spine, from Mooladhara, from the material world. So a typical Vanaprastha is when you enter into the Anahata Chakra. And then later at an older age, sannyasa, when your energy, life force energy reaches the Agna, where you are pure white and you are a Brahmin. When I say renouncer, what does that mean? You don't hold on to anything. You've renounced everything, and there's no desire, no materialistic desire. So this is how we should be interpreting ashram after we saw the part 1. So what ashram means is what we should do at different stages in life. So this is how it is. So it's Varna and ashram. It's a 2-dimensional model. Varna means what happens when the life force energy is at each level or chakra, and ashram means when it should happen. We are setting a target time. Our ancestors have set a target time. So let's say, for example, you want to build a house before you get married, or you have another target. You want to get married before you are 25. So we have these different targets. Even if you're working in a company, when there's a project, you have the project schedule and timeline, right? You start the project and then you do all these activities and then you end the project. So setting a target time for each and every task, that's what is typically happening here. So ashram is nothing but setting a target time of when it should happen. So when you look at this, it's a 2-dimensional model. It's not complete, right? Because I know what's happening. I know when it should happen. But how should it happen? I don't know that. So I said from Mooladhara to Swadhisthana, energy rises by itself, and then I have to put in effort. What should I do? I don't know. So there's something that's missing there. The how part is missing, and so I need a 3-dimensional model. So this third part that fits into this 3-dimensional model is the dharma. Dharma, we all question, like we have question about what exactly a dharma is. What's the definition of dharma? Dharma is nothing but it's how to steps. When you do a DIY project, it's how to do steps, right? So that's what dharma is all about. There is an intention in every action that we do, not just the physical actions, even in our thought, even when we think. There is an intention behind every action, and we call this as cause and effect. You would have heard of cause and effect, right? At different places. So there is a cause for an action that you do, and the effect is based on the intent of the action. Right? I think you get it. So there's a reason for the action, and then when you perform the action, something happens. And this effect is based on the intent of the action. And let me give you an example of a doctor versus a killer. A doctor takes a knife, cuts open a person's stomach to do a surgery. A killer takes the same knife, cuts open the person's stomach to kill the person. So when you look at it, the action is it's the same. But the intent behind the action defines whether it's a dharma or adharma. For in the case of a doctor, he's trying to save a life. So the intent behind the action is what we call as dharma. If you take this example of a doctor versus a killer, that's dharma versus adharma. So this dharma that goes with each action it justifies the action. So who defines this dharma? Who tells me what is right, what is wrong? There's nothing is right and wrong because that is relative, right? So who defines this dharma? That's the law of nature. There's no one sitting somewhere saying, okay, this is right and this is wrong. The laws of nature, when you look at the gravitational force, even before Newton, the apple fell from the tree. Even now, it does the same thing, right? So the gravitational force existed before Newton and after. The earth rotates for billions of years. The earth is rotating around the sun. It goes around the orbit. Same thing it does day in and day out. But that's what is called dharma. You sow a mango seed. What comes up? The tree yields a mango fruit. It doesn't give us apples, right? So dharma of the seed is to yield mangoes, not yield something else. So that's the law of nature. So that is what is dharma. Okay, so when you put the varna and ashrama and dharma together, we get this three-dimensional model. So this is how we are connecting the dots. So what is varnashrama dharma? What is the definition of varnashrama dharma after today's session, after we see part 1 and part 2 put together? It's bringing up the life force energy from the base all the way up at different stages of our lives by doing what is needed to be done. That is what is the interpretation of, the proper interpretation of Varnashrama Dharma. It's basically transitioning from a Shudra to a Brahmin. It's a journey from black to white. There's nothing right or wrong in this. I'm not saying Shudra is wrong and a Brahmin is the best part. No. We have to go through all these stages. A Shudra is the same level as a Brahmin, and we all have to cross through these stages in life. When we are born, we have no choice. We are all Shudras because our energy is focused at the Mooladhara. That's all it is, right? And when the energy keeps coming up, the energy moves from gross to subtle. See, when I talk about this life force energy or the Kundalini or whatever you want to call it, the Kundalini is at different levels, it's a beautiful energy, and at different levels, the emotions that we see is just a manifestation of this Kundalini energy. So when it is at the base of the spine, when I experience alertness or dullness. When it rises up, it's either creativity, or if it's very bad and low, I experience lust. When it comes up, I see joy and generosity when my energy is high. Kundalini, when the energy is low and imbalanced, at the Manipura, I see jealousy and greed. And then when it goes to the Anahata, if the Kundalini energy is good and balanced and high, I experience love, compassion towards everyone else, not just my own family. And if the Kundalini energy is very low and imbalanced, all I see is fear or hatred. When it goes to the Vishuddhi, if it's high, it's gratitude. If it's low, it's grief. When it goes to the Agna, if it's high, it's all complete awareness. And if it's low, it's anger. When I say complete awareness, your mind, which is in a fluid state, becomes very crystal consciousness. It becomes like it solidifies, and that's what we call as a chitta. No, we call Siddhargal in Tamil. That's what it is. So it's transitioning from a Shudra to a Brahmin, the journey from black to white, from gross to subtle. Your energy moves from gross to subtle, and you transition from a materialistic world to a spiritual world. So this is how how we connect the dots of Varna, Ashrama, and Dharma. And we want to see one more thing here. So in the Vedas, where is the Varna, the Brahmin, and all these 4 classes actually referred to at the earliest times, right? The Rig Veda is the earliest time where it's mentioned about the 4 divisions of Varnas. It is in the Purusha Sukta, which has the Brahmin, Rajanya or the Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra classes, which are forming the mouth, arms, thighs, and feet. So I've given the verses in the Purusha Sukta, which actually talks about these 4 classes of Varnas. And when you literally translate that, it means the Brahmin was his mouth, of both his arms was the Rajanya made. His thighs became the Vaishya, from his feet the Shudra was produced. And how we can interpret that is when we say the Brahmin is born from the mouth or face, It is the Agna Chakra. When our life force energy reaches the Agna, that is where the energy reflects as a Brahman. And Rajanya or Kshatriya is arms, is what Rigveda says. Arms indicates action, movement, and the chakra that's associated to action and movement is Manipura Chakra. Vaishya is born from the thighs. What does that mean? What is in between the thighs? That's your sex chakra or the Swadhisthana chakra. So when a Vaishya is born from thighs, it means it's born from the Swadhisthana chakra. A Shudra is born from feet. Feet, what gives sthira nature or the stability to you is the Muladhara chakra. So that sthira nature or stability is indicated by our feet, right? Because that's what gives us the stability. So at Muladhara, we are the Shudras. So this is how we should be interpreting the Purusha Sukta in the Rig Veda. This is the rising up of the energy from the Muladhara to the Agna, the journey from black to white. So we know it's our goal of the goal of the soul is to achieve, go back to the home and to unite with the higher consciousness, and which is also called the Purusha. So becoming one with the higher consciousness. So this is how what is mentioned in Rig Veda and how we should be interpreting. There is also one more phrase in the Bhagavad Gita where the Varnas are mentioned. And again, this is being commonly referred to when people talk about the four Varnas. So the phrase is given there, Chatur Varnam. Chatur is four. Chatur Varnam means the four Varnas. Maya, Srishtam, Guna. So Lord Krishna says, the four Varnas are created by me based on Guna and Karma. So that's the reason why we saw a slide on Guna, right? So now we know what Guna is. A karma literally means action. So I don't want to go deep into karma. It's a different topic by itself. But in general, karma means actions. And guna, we know it's the nature of our energies. So basically what Lord Krishna says is it's just uplifting our energies that's based on our actions and nature of our energies. So when you think about it, what defines, what stops the energy from going up or what brings the energy up? It's our actions and it's the nature of our energies. If we are very tamasic or very rajasic, tamas means the energy is concentrated at the Muladhara, Swadhisthana, it's not rising up. We are very rajasic, which means there's imbalance in the Manipura, it's not going to rise up. And this nature or guna of the energies is defined by the food and lifestyle. And what else brings the energies up? The dharmic actions, which is what is referred to as karma. Karma literally means actions. So your gunas and karmas are what going to be defining the rising up of your energies. So uplifting our energies is based on our actions and nature of our energies. Sattvic food, meditation, and practices, you know, the yogic kind of practices that it's gently going to brush off the negativity around us, and it's going to remove the unwanted emotions. It's going to bring us to balance. So in other words, what Lord Krishna is actually saying is, you take care of your actions and gunas and I will take you home. Right? So this is what how we should be interpreting the Varnas that's mentioned by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. So we saw interpretation of Varna in the Rig Veda. We saw interpretation of Varnas in Bhagavad Gita. And in between, there are many places where the Varnas mentioned. There are many, at the later stage, in Manusmriti, for example, the Varnas interpreted incorrectly, like our first slide. It talks about caste system. So that's not how we should be interpreting. So we are at the end. We're concluding. So I think we are well ahead of time. So we have more time for questions if you have any questions. So let's look at this. So now we know, right, when compared to the very first slide that we started off with, we interpreted Varnashrama Dharma as a broader classification of the caste system. Now we know after part 1 and part 2 that the caste system is actually unreal and it has no base. All this time we've been proclaiming that the Varnashrama Dharma was the base, and we've just disproved that. So caste is actually unreal. We can ride a BMW, we can ride even a toy car, but what happens when you ride a virtual car which will not take us anywhere? So that's how it is, right? We are holding on to the caste and we are stuck. We are at the place where we started. We never moved. Right. So when you actually start, drop all that and look at where your energy is right now and start working on that, then that's what is going to help us. So that's the actual interpretation of the Varnashrama Dharma. So I call this the mythical caste system because we've proved that it's no more real, it's unreal. So in this mythical caste system, some of us are fascinated and some of us are frustrated. Do you know why? We are fascinated if we are on the top level of the graded hierarchy, because that's the human nature. When there's someone below you, you always like that. And when you are at the lowest, then you are frustrated. So some are fascinated and some are frustrated. And what is eventually happening is we are missing to focus on our own growth. So achieving the goal starts with setting us free from all bondages. You know, the goal of the soul, that's what our ancestors, that's why they made the way of living. It's an integral, everything was an integral part of our life, the food, lifestyle, the celebrations, festivals, and everything else was part of our life. And the reason that was done is because we wanted to achieve the goal. That was our primary focus. And in that process, the very first step is to set us free from all bondages or identities. So when I say identities, not just the caste, right? We have so many identities around us. I'm rich and I'm a manager, I'm a boss, and I have a big house. Whatever is the identity that you might be carrying, I'm a man, I'm a woman, whatever it is. The different kind of identities that we have around us, we think we have these identities, we think it's going to protect us, but in fact, we are enslaved by these identities. We hold on to it so tight, and that's what increases our ego. So what's the primary, the blockage that's going to prevent you from bringing our energies up? It's the ego. If you know Tamil, then you can read this. If not, I will tell you. The great poet Subramanya Bharati, he said, "Vittu vidudalayagi nirpa inda chittu kuruviye pole." Let go of everything and become free like the sparrow. And that's what he means. Let go of all the bondages and identities that you're holding on to, and along with that, you will drop this caste system as well. So feel the freedom, and it's very beautiful when you feel that freedom. So drop and feel the freedom right away. And thank you all, and wishing you all good luck in this new journey. So I'm done. So you can unmute yourself and we can start off with your comments, questions, whatever. Let me stop the sharing. And yeah.
Can I ask a question, Mani, here? Before the question, this was totally brilliant. You gave me a different dimension to Tirukkural and this Varnashrama Dharmam. The main reason why I joined today is, hailing from Tamil Nadu, this is a very controversial topic, right? Because I come from a family wherein we revere both Periyar and Kanchi Periyar. So I thought this is going to be giving the physical meaning of, discrimination and all that. But this is really super because I get a new dimension of what Varnashrama Dharma is. And there is a lot of misinterpretation in our society. So that's fine. So my question is not going to be anymore on the Varnashrama Dharma or the old understanding of us. So the question here is, there was a slide wherein you associated feelings to the chakra. Quick notes that I made was, there was an association between compassion and anahata and gratitude and vishuddhi. So on an everyday life, right? At times we feel compassionate and at times we express our gratitude to others. So does it mean that life force basically traverses through these different chakras and then comes back and gets concentrated in, Swadhisthana or the root chakra, whatever that is? If my question is clear.
Yeah, it's clear. Yeah, it's a very good question. So at times we see glimpses of those, but we are not there all the time, right? Okay, so if we want to be there all the time, it's when the life force energy goes up all the way up. So the thing is, the life force energy goes up and it's very tough to keep them stay there all the time. But when it goes up there, and if you're able to keep it there all the time, and that's when the progress actually happens. So let's say, for example, I move into the Manipura, and then I can come down to the Swadhisthana. It's not a given, it's not a set in stone, it's going to stay there. It's based on the gunas and the karmas, where it's always going to be a progress. So there are a lot of things that come into play where we want always to see a progress, right? But this glimpse that you say, the gratitude or the grief, that's very natural, and that is to keep it there. Like, for example, anahata, it's compassion, right? So your energy comes there, it just sees a glimpse of it, but it's not staying there all the time. That's different from bringing up the energy and making it stay there. You see the difference, right? You bring up the energy because we do a lot of activities in our day-to-day life. The energy might come there. You might get a feeling, you might get a glimpse of it, and then it goes back. So even intuition, for example, there are times where we get an intuition, right? And it has worked out, it has turned out to be right. But that's the intuition is the Agna Chakra. Doesn't mean your energy has reached the Agna Chakra, it's there all the time. It's just a glimpse of it. But if it goes there and if it stays there, and then it solidifies, then it doesn't come back. That's when whatever you see and whatever you say is an intuition. You don't call it as an intuition anymore. That's how it is. So there are times when you will see the glimpse of it. It just goes there and comes down. But if we put an actual effort for it to rise up and stay there, that's a different experience. I hope I answered your question, because
Yeah.
there are moments we might see glimpses. Yes.
Okay.
But
So is my
making it
understanding
stay
correct that the energy or the Kundalini basically has risen up to that point and then it immediately drops down back to where it was? Is that a fair understanding, or?
not the entire Kundalini. These are energies, right? Maybe just some energy that is showing up in that way. It's not your complete Kundalini energy has gone there.
Okay, makes sense.
Because that's a different feeling. Yeah, you would experience that in a different way. Just the moment of experience is not the complete Kundalini going there.
Okay. Thank you so much. That clarifies things.
Yeah.
Hey, Kalpana, this is Desikan. I have a couple of questions.
Yes, Desikan.
Yeah. First of all, excellent job, Kalpana. I really appreciate all your effort on this. Definitely a great effort on providing us a clarity on all the concepts that we have in the age-old Vedas. My first question is, moving up from Shudra to Brahman, can we skip a couple of varnas? Can a person just go from Shudra to Brahman behavior or the energy level? An example is probably Swami Vivekananda. He didn't have to go through Vaishya and Kshatriya energy levels, right?
For Swami Vivekananda, he went through it in his previous life. And then you remember I talked about the material world and the spiritual world. Swami Vivekananda completed his journey in the material world. He went into the spiritual world, right? He landed there. And then that's a different world by itself. So when he's born again, his journey continues only from the spiritual world. But he already went through the complete material world. In the case of us, we never completed our journey in the material world. And then we are coming again and again. Unless until we complete it, we are not going to have a life like Vivekananda.
So the journey is not limited to the body, but to the soul, which
Yes.
might have, or obviously has multiple births to it.
Yes. When I keep talking about the goal, it's the goal of the soul, not the physical body, because the soul is immortal, not the physical body. Every birth we get a new physical body. It's just changing. It's like changing our clothes, right? But the soul is the one that takes different physical bodies, because if it's your goal, you have to strive for it. Right? Not somebody else is going. If you have a goal, you have to work for it. Somebody else is not going to work for you. It's the goal of the soul. The soul has to work for it, not the physical body. So the soul takes different bodies at different in different lifetimes to achieve its to make sure that it reaches its home. The physical bodies are just like, vehicles, carriers. You want to go from point A to point B, you take an auto rickshaw, you take a cab or whatever. That's your physical body. But destination A to destination B is you who's traveling. The physical body is more like a vehicle. You
Okay,
take
so the soul will have to go through all the 4 classes.
Yeah, because it's when I go from point A to point B, let's say in Jackson Hole, from your place, you want to come to the town center, you have to take the complete route, right? You can take short routes, you can take longer routes, but you cannot skip like a part in between and jump from point A to point C. You have to travel the different the points.
Okay, and it can be reversible as well. So a person might go to Kshatriya level at one birth, and then during his next birth, he might go back to Vaishya. So
that's how it is, because when you are at the Kshatriya, okay, so let's say a person is at the Kshatriya level, for some reason he grows old, he dies, and then his journey starts from Mooladhara. So he has to start from a Shudra.
Okay. And you mentioned something about age limit in one of the slide, wherein, or there is a limit, right? Is that pertaining to a single bird, or
no? It's not age limit. I think probably I gave some examples, right? Well, like a 5-year-old and in a family, let's say, is that what you're talking? Yeah, that's more like an example. I want to show a family where you see all the 4 ashrams. There might be families where you don't see all the 4 ashrams. You don't see the great grandparents, but I'm just trying to show a family where you can see all the 4 ashrams. You see a child, brahmacharya, then you see a grihastha, you see the grandparents, vanaprastha, and then the great grandparents of the child, which is like a sannyasa. A family where it has all the 4.
Okay. Sorry, but you mentioned that when the soul takes the next birth, it has to start from Kshatriya level, right? Does that mean, yeah?
Yeah, when it comes back, it starts from the base of that world. So keep material world, spiritual world. The base of material world is Mooladhara, base of spiritual world is Anahata, right? So when a person dies, in whichever world he is in, he'll come back to the same world. So when he comes back in the same world, he starts from the base of that world. So when he dies in material world, when he comes back, he has to start from Mooladhara. When he dies in spiritual world, when he comes back, he will start from Anahata. That's where I gave the example of Vivekananda.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Anyone else? Any questions or any thoughts, any suggestions? You liked it? Or
I enjoyed it, Kalpana. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Radha.
Hi, Kalpana. This is Deepa here. Very good and informative session for people who have still a very conventional idea of what this caste system is. But I have a question. Like, for example, right? If you technically see the word Brahmin, right? A Brahmin is supposed to be very stringent in all the austerities, so that it takes them to the highest level of thinking. There is so much of restrictions and so much of physical and so much of mental restrictions that they put forth on themselves. I'm talking about what typically we have read or we have seen, which we have lost through generations, right? There were so many austerities that they actually practiced to get to that level, right? So, but there can also be, like, from your definition, I understand it is like where you are very detached from whatever results. You just do your karma, and you just do your karma, and when you're unattached to the outcome, that is what takes you to that evolved state, right? So I am not able to kind of tie these both. And the other thing, what I think is, even Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, right? You do your karma, and a karma yogi is also, one of the paths to reach whatever moksha or whatever, right? It is not necessarily that you need to go through the spiritual path to attain whatever it is, but sometimes a person can, like, for depending on the role that you play, right? Like, for example, you can be like, I think of Bhishma, right? Bhishma was doing his dharma, but he was also, like the strategist. It's not that he was in the spiritual world, but he played the role that he needed to play. But at the end, he still, went to Krishna's feet. So how there are so many very contradicting things that I am saying, and it confuses me. So if you can clarify, that will be great.
Sure, Deepa. Yeah, thank you for your appreciation, and thanks for joining. So I get your point. So the first thing that you talked about, the austerities, right? When the energy goes up, as I was talking to Manikandan to answer his question, when the energy goes up, there's always a possibility it's going to come down, because we're all humans. And if you look at Tirukkural, I'm assuming many of you know that, but the very last chapter in Thuravaraviyal is Avaarathal. That means getting rid of your desires. So what that actually means is, even at the last phase, you can get you can get desires. And when you get desires, there is a possibility that it can come down, right? So that's why he keeps Avaarathal there on the top, all the way on top in Thuravaraviyal. What that means is, that's the reason they practice all these austerities, to be so strict on themselves so that they can, finally achieve the goal and then get to the other side. You really don't have to be so strict if your mind is very strong, right? So there are two things. One is getting your physical body ready to go through this. And then at the mental level, you also go through this. So doing all these austerities is more to make yourself what do you call, like tavam, right? You practice all these, so you're able to tolerate and endure, the endurance, right? To build all that, they do all these strictly. You really don't have to do that when your mind is strong. There are different yogas. There is bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, and then there is karma yoga, kriya yoga. There are different ways, different paths you can achieve this. And a wise person would always put all these different 4 combinations together. Right? And talking about Krishna as karma yogi, definitely. So he says a karma yogi is the person who's very close to him, right? And what is a karma yogi? A karma yogi is someone who does his activity, action, whatever, but does not attach himself to the fruits of the action. So let's say I go out, somebody is asking me to help them. I give them some money, I help them, but somewhere in the corner of the mind, I think, oh, I helped them, I'm doing a good job. So it's giving me good karma. So you see how I attach myself to the action that I'm doing, even though it's a good action, that good karma is going to attach to me. And what does that mean? I'm going to be coming back again. Don't think that if you have a lot of good karmas and no bad karmas, you are not going to come back. Even if you have good karmas, you will again come back, and maybe you will enjoy your good karmas. You will be born in a very rich family. You will have all the comforts. You will be very healthy because of your good karmas. But if you have good karmas, you will again come back. So in order to cut this cycle, to stop coming back, that's what Lord Krishna says, be a karma yogi. That means don't attach yourself to the fruits of your action. So that is right. You can be a karma yogi. You just do your actions and then don't. But how easy is it to not attach to these, to these actions? It's very difficult as humans, right? That's why we need all these practices put together. A wise person will do all these practices, all these different yogas together, so that your kriya yoga will keep your mind balanced. Your karma yoga is more of a service. You will do the service, but it will help you not attach with the benefits of it. And then your bhakti yoga will make you very loving and very meek. And then there is the jnana yoga, which is what this session is more like, a jnana yoga, right? For all of us, we're going through a very high knowledge. So all of these put together is what going to make your journey very quick and easy. But there are people who, if you look at Bhakti period, right, and we had all these Meera and the all the Alvars and all of them, they went only through Bhakti Yoga. So you choose your path, but I would say a wise person would put all this together would be the easiest way. And in Tirukkural, when Karma Yogi is nothing but in Tirukkural Ilvarti, he says, Vayathul Valvanga Valvavan Vanurim Devathul Vaikapram. That's exactly what a Karma Yogi is. So you do your karmas, don't be attached to your actions, and you will not have good karma and bad karma. Your bag will be empty. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, definitely for the most part. But the Bhishma part, that's so. What you say was Bhishma a Karma Yogi?
Yes, maybe, yeah, as per the story, because he reached Krishna's feet, but it depends, right? So when you look and comment at other person's life, you wouldn't know, because you're not looking at the entire part. And there is as I said, so let's say let me give you this example. Somebody is coming you're standing outside your house. There's someone chasing another person. He's trying to kill the other person. He runs and comes. He's hiding inside your house. He tells you there's someone chasing me. He's going to kill me. Please save me. So when the killer comes and asks you, did he see someone going this way? What would you say?
Yeah, no.
Let's say you practice truth. You don't want to lie. You are a person who's committed to not lying because you think lying is a bad thing. It'll get you bad karma. You don't want to lie. So there's someone who's coming to kill the other person. Do you want to save the other person's life, or do you want to make sure that you're speaking the truth? That's your choice. That's your choice. I don't want to put you on spot. But what I'm saying is, so it varies, right? So again, I want to go back to Tirukkural. He says, Poimayum Vaimedatu. Purai Tirtha Nanmai Payakumenin, right? That's the Kural, I think. So if you think a lie will save somebody's life, then you say it. So I think when we talk about Bhishma's life or Arjuna's life or anybody else's life, when I look at it laterally in a one-dimensional view, I don't think I'll be able to comment. Maybe something looks wrong to me. Something is actually not wrong at all. Right? I always think like that. So, but
scope of our understanding could also be very limited, right? I'm not well read on all these, so my scope of understanding is definitely limited as much as I've heard and read.
I personally, if you ask me the story, I have a lot of comments on Bhishma, so I don't know if I want to talk about those here.
Yeah, maybe separate sometime.
Yeah. Anything else? Anyone?
Hi, Kalpana. This is Purnima, and
Hi, Purnima.
I really loved the connection that you made with the caste system and spirituality. I mean, I've never given much thought to caste system. You know me. I mean,
yeah,
I didn't. But actually, hearing from you, the connection between those two was really impressive. I really loved it. Thank you.
Thanks, Purnima. And I'm sorry I had to use certain Tamil quotes here and there because most of them are Tamil. So I was keeping you in mind, but I know you will not.
Being with you, I'm half Tamilian. Don't worry.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? Anyone? All right. So. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry.
We still have time. Yeah, go ahead. I mean,
So there's this verse from Tirumandiram which says Udambal Arivar Uiral Arivar Sivagadi Sero Matar Udal Valatten Uir Valattene. So these when the energies or the life force basically, or the energy basically uprises from each chakra, progresses towards the the Sahasrara, right? Will it also make the body not decay? Will it make it immortal, make the body as well immortal?
No, body is never, you cannot claim it as immortal at all, right? So when you say, Tirumular says, Udal Valarthen, Uir Valarthene, is because when you take care of your body, the goal of the soul would be achieved easily, because that's the vehicle you're traveling in, right? What happens if it punctures? Can you reach your destination on time? You cannot. Your goal is to reach the destination on time. You're going for an interview or a party or whatever. But if your vehicle punctures, then I'm not able to achieve my goal, though it's just a vehicle. So we have to take care of your physical health, because that's the vehicle that you are riding in. And if anything happens to that, then you will not be able to achieve your goal. So that's what Tirumular means when he says, Udal valarthen, uyir valarthene.
Okay. In that case, why do we basically have Jiva Samadhis? I mean, if we basically consider the body is just a physical carrier of the soul, where the soul progresses but the body doesn't. So why do we preserve the mortal remains of, siddhas or yogis, and then we say that, it has some, we get benefited when we spend some time, in the premises of the Jiva Samadhi. So I've got a little, I don't know if I beg to differ or something. So why would we say that body is just a mere carrier when we, at least in the South, we, visit a lot of Jiva Samadhis, and there's a school of thought that all of the temples now, the bigger temples or the ancient temples, houses the body of a siddha or yogi or something like that.
See, for an enlightened person, right?
Yeah.
So ideally, when you get enlightened, you leave the body.
Yeah.
Right. But then there are enlightened masters who come back, and then, or you are enlightened, and then if your body is able to take that so much of energy, then for an enlightened person, his soul is not strongly attached to his body. But for us, it's not like that. Our soul is attached to the body, right? So they are able to discriminate and separate the soul from the body. Even Tirumula's story is like there's someone who left the body, got a different body, right? That's the story. Yeah. So they know how to differentiate their body and the soul. The soul is so powerful. So they've already enlightened. And when they're already enlightened, there's so much of power that sticks on to the vehicle also.
Okay.
So that vehicle is also reverberating with some kind of an energy, because they are already enlightened souls. Even though the soul leaves, the soul might not be there, but there's something that sticks. Like when you walk on a beach, wet sand, you already walked, but the imprints are still there, right? So it's still reverberating with some kind of an energy, and that's the belief. They maintain the bodies of the people who went in on a Jiva Samadhi. So that's why when.
Oh, sorry, go on. Sorry.
That's why when you go near like really powerful people who left their bodies and their body is still there, you feel the vibration there in the samadhi.
So will it basically help in any way, raising the chakras effortlessly, at least to a little extent, visiting the Jiva Samadhis? Will it have any impact on the Kundalini or something like that?
I don't know. It gives you it gives a calm ambience, and then it's all your how much you believe that, right?
Okay.
It's
basically a perception. Okay.
It definitely, there's definitely a reverberation. It gives a calm ambience, and then you can sit there, meditate. It's going to help you to raise your chakras, because it gives a peaceful environment. You can sit there and meditate. But how much that energy is going to come and uplift your energy, I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe I haven't experienced.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Anything else? Anyone? But you know how to reach me, so you can just...
Can I put in a few words?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm Sarguna from Chennai. Kalpana.
That's my sister, really, for all of you.
Really proud of you, because you've given a very different dimension to the caste system, which you've been learning from our very childhood. I feel one should have real guts and confidence to talk on such a topic. But when it reaches all of us in the society, maybe the evils attached to caste discrimination, such things will slowly fade away, I feel. But I really need some more time to contemplate on this.
Sure. Thank you so much. So, so that's my thought, right? knowledge is always communal. It's not, you don't own the knowledge. So as long as you keep your cups empty, the nature is always giving and you can receive the knowledge. Receiving is one thing, but how much you want to share it with the rest of the people to, that's a different thing. So I always believe knowledge is communal. You have to share. And this particular knowledge, yeah, definitely my husband was saying, do you really want to start off with this series? Do you want to think about something else? I said, no, I really want to start off with this series. We think it is very sensitive topic to talk about, but then once you get into it, when you're able to separate between that, oh, it's really not what it is, it's something else, then it no more becomes a sensitive topic. Right now that you've understood, you no more think Varnashram Dharma is a sensitive topic. It's something which is for me, it's given for me. I have to work on it to uplift my energies from one level to the other. So we have to make people realize this, make it more common. Let people start talking about it. And the other thing is, all this time when we want to fight against the caste system, even though we want to, we've always been cutting the branches. So what happens when you cut the branches? The tree is still going, it's going to be growing, right? It's going to grow big. When you cut the branches, they usually say it grows bigger. So when we cut the branches, it's going to grow big. Now I'm trying to shake the roots. What I'm trying to do is, it's a small effort, maybe it's a small group, but there's always a beginning, right? So that's why I wanted to start off with this topic. And when you start shaking the roots, then probably there is sometime, maybe not now, 50 years, 100 years, sometime down the lane, it would be uprooted totally. It's a big desire for me to uproot it totally, but there's always a beginning. So that's why I don't want to focus on fighting with people, cut the branches, but rather go to the roots and start shaking it, so that I'm not going to be uprooting it, but I might be loosening it a little bit, but then people who come after me, they will try to uproot it, and at one point in time, it would totally disappear. That's my vision. So thank you. Anyone else? Anything? And as I said, you know how to reach out to me. If you would like to, I'm recording this, right? So I will be uploading this session. I'm going to trim certain parts, upload it, and I will share the YouTube link with all of you. If you want to go over it, if you have any questions, then you can reach out to me anytime. Right. If no other questions, then thank you all so much for joining, and maybe another session we can all meet.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kalpana.
Thank you.